So like when we were in school or when we were in bachelors, the most common question was about identifying the themes in any work or in any novel. Basically, any work of literature used to be like it used to be about the themes of the work. And there are many works which have similar themes, and we might think that because they have similar themes, they are the same thing. Like here, he gives it names two things that we say that Flaubert's sentimental education is about the adventures of a naive, self-centered young man in a chaotic time, and that Tutuola's The Palm Wine Drinkard is about the same thing. But these are not the same thing. But they are close enough for the purpose of comparison. Uh, we generally ask what's the book about whenever we want to buy a book, or if we ask someone to suggest us a book, we generally ask what the book is about. So we may say that two novels or work of literature have the same things, same themes, and therefore we assume that they are the same, but they are not the same. Two books having the same themes are also very different from one another, can be further compared on the basis of themes. Themes make a work of literature memorable as literature, and the recognition and disavowal of theme distinguishes the literariness of a work from ordinary language. Now we comes to the second section, which is misunderstanding themes. So many times when we read a book, or for example, when we watch a movie, we misunderstand its themes. Like I watched Heather, but I couldn't. I still am not able to figure out the whole movie. I watched it for the first time, and I think I need to watch it for the second time to understand it completely. It says that even as the simplest piece of writing, his thematic strength, and these thematic strengths link link two pieces of work together. It might have argument, imagery, style, or situation, and these thematic units of a work link it to other works. Um for example, there are many novels and short stories and a lot of literature written on the theme of partition. And together, this literature is known as post-colonial. No, together it is known as partition literature. These works are not the same, but they have the same themes. But still, these works have a coherence which link them to each other. These works can be further read to build a more ambitious argument about their occurrence and the function that they matter for comparative reading. Then, in the next paragraph, popular critic I.A. Richards, while he was teaching in Tsin- Tsinghua University in Beijing, assigned his class Thomas Hardy's novel Tess of the Urbervilles. So, as we know, the novel is quite famous. Tess was born in a poor family, but she was very beautiful. And then she met Alec de Urberville, who tries to seduce her, and then he raped her, and she got pregnant with his child, and the child died. And Tess then tried to move on, and then she got a job, and then there she met Angel, and they got married. But again, Angel left her when she told him about her past relationship with Tess. And then she becomes the mistress of the man of Alec, who originally caused her the trouble. And in the end, we see that she was found not of murder. So it's a long novel, and it says that it took Richards months to get through the end of the story. And the when Richards was discussing this novel in the class, when it came to the end, to the following sentence, I quote: "Upon the corners of the tower, a tall fixed staff was fixed. Their eyes were riveted on it. A few minutes after the hour had struck, something moved slowly up the staff and extended itself upon the breeze." So it suggests that Tess died and she was hanged. So at that moment, the class burst into spontaneous applause, and then Richards gave them papers, like sheets of papers, and asked them to write down the reason why they were applauding. And then the class said that uh, The Tess had been an unfilial daughter in the very beginning of the book, and she was not helpful. Like her horse also died because of her, and she hadn't treated her father with proper respect, and that they had all been waiting through the very long book to see her get her due. And at the very end, Thomas Hardy, and at the very end, she got what she deserved, and she was hanged to death. So that's what the class said. Now, this suggests that how the students have failed to catch Hardy's sympathy for the heroine, because throughout the novel, Tess had to go through a lot of things, and she was not responsible for for half of what has happened with her, because she got raped, and then her child died, and then Angel also left her, and because of these circumstances, she was left helpless. The piling of adverse circumstances to make her crime. So it says that her crime is understandable, if not permissible. If one considers this movement, then he says about then the essay says that if one considers this movement in a classroom from the point of view of an English fiction specialist, the Chinese student have got it in a wrong way. So the themes that a Chinese student will point out are opposite to the themes of what the Hardy seems to have conceived. But if one considers it from the point of view of comparative, the students the students have misunderstood themes, and that also expresses a powerful cultural bias, because the work is a foreign work. So many times we fail to understand a foreign work. A Chinese would not be able to might not be able to understand the themes of a foreign work as well as he would be able to understand the themes of his own language. I mean, that's what I have understood. So it says that it's not just a matter of failing to get to the point of a single novel, but sometimes it says meaning of a text is contextual. The object literature itself exists in a context. So sometimes when a work written in with a tragic theme when encounters an audience whose understanding is strongly influenced by stories told in a more moral way, the meaning of the outcome of a story of a work like this changes. So, like we see that rather than the victim of her circumstances, she becomes an example of what happens to bad people. So the students couldn't understand the themes completely. They blamed Tess for whatever had happened with her, instead of showing sympathy or instead of sympathizing with her. Uh, then okay, 1 second. And to take- Okay, then I come to the next section, which is national images. When Okay, so when people from different cultures, or for that matter from different villages, are in contact, they create an image of the other person in their heads. We all do that. Like for example, if like we have this image of Gujaratis in our head that they add sugar in all of their food, and like that's not true. Some of them do that, but not all of them. And then there is this like many people have asked me कि राजस्थान में बारिश नहीं आती है या फिर राजस्थान is completely like entirely desert, which is also not true until and unless you visit and like you get to know a person or a city or whatever. You don't know it completely. So when people from different cultures get together or meet each other, they are apt to construct generalization or images of the foreign personality. The French comparatist Marius Francois Guard proposed the study of such images as a central task for comparative literature. Um, then there are three excerpts from different works. I'm not going to read them all, but I'm going to tell them what they are about. So one is from Hovel, Zhang, then the other one is from Zhang Tingyu, and and the third one is from Jardin. Honestly, I don't even know who they are, but yeah. So I read the excerpt, and I get this understanding that they
Is there some issue with Hadi's connection?
Yes, so there is a possibility because her connection is always wavering. I'll ask her what is happening.
Anyway, till she reconnects, anyone has to say something about what she has said? Any questions or observations?
Yeah,
Yeah, go ahead, Roshi.
she explained it get yeah. So some of what she said, it gets along with the lines of what we are learning in reader response theory. What she told about Thomas Hardy's novel, as in the Chinese students would get a different idea altogether about what the theme of that novel is. So, and apart from that, it's also about the experience as well. Like your experiences, I cannot experience what.
You mean to say that the point she is making is about individual differences in perception of the text or cultural differences? And are they the same, Rushi? You are right about differences in reception or understanding of the text because of cultural reasons, right? So, what is the point that the author is trying to make?
Sir, Khadija won't be able to connect. Should I continue with the rest of the? I mean,
Yes.
what from what I see there?
She has connected. She has connected.
But my part was almost over.
Okay. What were you saying? Will you sum up whatever you have said? Khadija, kahan pe, where have you reached? Okay, Dehini, you can continue if there is some problem at her end.
Okay, so basically, I have not had a close study of these examples, but throughout these examples, for example, there was one. Throughout these examples, basically, it has been said that we have a different national image. We have a different image of people, which might or may not be true, but based on which we judge that, right? So, for example, and in this case, the wherever the literature comes from, whoever is the author of a particular literature and the country that he belongs to becomes normal. Because, for example, we talk about Thomas Hardy. So when Thomas Hardy talks about Tess being a, a damsel in distress, or basically, Tess having a lot of difficulties in her life, so that becomes normal because Thomas Hardy's country and his viewpoint and the way he has written meant that. So, but when we talk about people in China, they would feel that this is not normal. But and always their viewpoint, their way of thinking, maybe their culture affected by their cultural ideologies, and their or maybe their own, their way of looking at something would be different. But that is always considered formal and not normal. So the person who belongs, the author, whichever country he or she belongs to, would be considered as something normal, whereas the other viewpoint would not be. So that is what I have understood from this part of the essay. The next part actually talks about what do you seek when you are comparing something. So initially, when we talk about comparing themes and images, we compare the recurrent themes and images which has been going throughout the history. And it is usually seen from the point of view of similarity. So if we take, for example, we compare novel like Color Purple, which is under a context of post-colonial literature, then we would compare another novel again in the context of post-colonial literature, and that context would be remaining the same because that's the similarity between the two. But what is happening is that when you are actually comparing the similar points, you are just stating what is there. Okay, but you also are forgetting that no two examples of the same thing would reveal precisely the same set of meanings, the same implication, or the same function that work has whenever it has occurred. So from there is a need to from seeking the point of similarities to seeking the point of differences because they have a different meaning and context. Initially, yes, there were even questions when things were not similar, and so initially there were even arguments where similarities were not even taken into consideration, where national tradition has overshadowed all of the other things. Especially if we talk about the Soviet Union in 1950s, but then come a more cosmopolitan view with the advent of world literature, that now it has been now a part of the mission of comparative literature is to create a social environment where cosmopolitan ambitions are there. When things are cosmopolitan and you accept that there exist similarities and differences as well. So comparative literature's first task was that to establish that yes, there are similarities between different cultures, between different texts. Now comes the question, how and why these similarities exist. So there can be multiple reasons. Maybe these similarities exist because of the same tradition. We see the similarities in our literature and the literature from literature in Africa because all of these, America, because these countries were colonized, right? So we have had the same thing happening. Another can be that the unchanging human nature. So, for example, the themes that maybe Jane Austen has taken, or maybe Shakespeare has taken, shows a way that human nature behaves similarly. For example, if we talk about the most famous novel of Jane Austen, Pride and Prejudice, we see that the character of Mrs. Bennet as, she wants to marry her daughters off, she wants to have a good family for her daughter and everything. This is also seen in Indian aunties all around, right? So you would see those characters, you would see similarities, and because of the unchanging human nature. There is another thing that can be taken into consideration is that are these people facing the same problems? So again, if we talk about consider this, let's consider patriarchy. This is something which has been very much prevalent in the West, and currently it's also very prevalent in India. So we are facing the same problems. Are the solutions of this thing same as well? So these are the questions which should be asked when we are talking about similarities between the compared text or themes or whatever. Then there is a very good example given here where if we talk about the ethnographic collections in a museum. So if we talk about collection of different things, they can be divided on the basis of geography. You can say that, okay, these are all the artifacts belonging to African culture. These are all the artifacts belonging to American culture, right? But then also there is a possibility that a different permutation has been done where the collections differ. For example, things that are same but from various regions are put in one corner. So there can be different permutation and combination. You can pick up one culture, or you can show the changeability or interliterariness between two. The point of this example is that the needs are more or less the same. It's just a it's just a different way of employing the materials, different tools and technique. So it comes back to the technique as discovery that we have read in the last semester by Mark Schorer, that maybe there is a possibility that the themes or the themes and the point that author is trying to make remains the same, but technique differs and the combination that you make differs. So that same thing can be applied into comparative literature. We can compare literature as culturally totalizing, or we can also compare literature on the basis of its function. So again, then the next paragraph on page number 73, and there's a very good line about in this, that few themes or images prove to have the same meaning when found in different time, places, or languages. We all know that the themes of war, the themes of love, death, journey, all of these things are universal. But an intercultural reader should not feel should feel actually the rewards in discovering what is different, what is individual about that work, and what it shares with other work. So yes, you can begin with by seeking similarities, but there's also a need to seek the differences. Then another example is given here about one of the most the worst greatest this literature in China, where a person talks about how he has failed and how he was before. There were ladies around him, and now he has failed. But here, the example is given. Then the idea of failure that the people in China have might be different. So, for example, the idea of when we talk about tests, right? So, the idea of what a girl should be or what a girl should deserve is something different in China. So obviously, a reader who does not have the context, sorry, who does not have a contextual information would certainly not understand the whole thing fully. But the reader who knows more sees more. So the point again, the essay is making that the meaning is contextual, and a thoughtful comparison would not be only between the two texts. A thoughtful comparison would also be their function in the society. So, for example, if you're considering if you're comparing A with B, and A belongs to its own culture, B belongs to its own culture. So you don't even only have to compare what is there in A or what is there in B, but you also have to compare what it means to that culture. Let's take an example of let's take an example of Heather only. So I have seen the movie. I have an idea about what the original text of Shakespeare is about. So you see the comparison of you can easily compare the themes like revenge. You can easily compare the themes like undying love for mother and etc. etc. But have you seen that there were many things layered up over each other when we talk about Heather? We see that there is a great theme about the loss of identity, where you don't know which country you belong to, and you have the conflict of Kashmir portrayed there. So you have to understand each particular text with its context of culture. Here the example is giving that if you are comparing Chinese landscape poetry with British landscape poetry, you are just not comparing the characteristics of landscape poetry. You should always also consider how Chinese landscape poetry affected the then traditions, what was happening there, and what caused it. Similarly goes to the British. So these are the ways which should be taken into consideration while comparing things. Yet there are many programs in this research area which seeks that universality in between literatures. And consider this as something like science. It says that when you do these things, it uh, rips away the whole essence of the comparison. So it basically means that when you compare, you are stripping a particular text of its multiple themes, but you are only considering one, what is comparable. So that is not a correct way to see, and an ambition comparison should always be very uh, or should be wary of filtering out the specific details. One should consider the text in whole. So similarities acts as a starting point, and one has to move away from mere description of what is similar to the explanation of why this is similar. So what has so ask a few questions while you are researching or while you are doing a comparison. You are using a comparison methodology. That what has caused this similarity? What effects did it have? And what might we learn for future generations? We can just, if we just simply ask the question that yes, there is similarity, what can this tell us about that? So this question would include a space for polyglottism, multidisciplinary and scholarly collaborations. The next section, then the last section of this essay is about themes, thematics, and thematization. So what happens is that when you the initially always themes is considered as has been of withstood a charge that it's simplistic and superficial. But the thing is, themes is consciously chosen by the writer, right? Theme is chosen by an author. Here, an example is given of John Donne, where he, if you would read this, you would understand that where he is sexualized, he has used, he has thread together military and sexual languages and kept our attention. So it was his way of choosing a theme. Another example is also given that, uh, if I'm not wrong, this is Ernst Robert Curtis. He drew out in his time in he was, I believe, German scholar, and he drew out in his time the medieval literature and throughout the ages. So what has happened and what are the classical themes of it? So his this readers this person has made a general idea about what are the common themes and what are the uh, things that are similar. But what happened is that the whole medieval literature and its themes, nature, and everything might seem different. There are a lot of things which were ignored while doing this comparison theory. So by so what important here is that thematic material. When you choose a material or when you choose a theme, it commands attention, shapes the imagined world, and you have to shape the imagined world into a world made of these possibilities and structure and consequence. Take Sadat Hassan Manto's example of Toba Take Singh, sorry. So why did he choose people in mental asylum? Why did he not talk about just simple prisoners with loss of their identities? This was his technique of portraying a very good satire over the current situation, because everything is chaotic and everyone is mad. And what there is a loss of identity, there is a loss of, so a technique utilized by him was my this theme remained the same, partition, and there were many literatures in partition. But what makes this different? The difference is the theme that he has applied. So the thematic material that you choose have to be and the way you write have to take into consider, it needs attention, and it needs, so you have to have a little bit of technique while doing so. But if you're comparing these two things, just considering what is similar, which would will that would strip away of any other thing. And last but not the least, he talks about that this thing is athematization. You're comparing and you're not considering other things is known as athematization. And another very good example of Mansfield Park is given, where Mansfield Park, like any other Jane Austen novel, for the longest period of time, it was considered as, about a chronicle of drawing rooms and tightly enclosed society. But few pages of this book and one character like Sir Thomas Burton talked that talked something, and Edward Said was the one who noticed that this novel is also about slavery. This novel is also has a great theme of slavery and absentee ownership. Yeah? So this is a close reading to a material and observing what is at the whole. And at the end, it is said that the alert reader detects the patterns of association or exclusion that gives the theme of a work their active role in generating new meaning. So if you are a close reader, you would understand that things of association and yes are taken into consideration, but what is different would give and would generate a new meaning. So that's from our part.
Very good. So you also, apart from giving an overview, you tried to relate it with the recommended reading part, right? That's very good. And somebody had asked a question that why had you put Toba Tek-Singh along with which are the other recommended readings? Does anyone remember?
Ward number 6, Toba Tek-Singh and Heather.
And Heather. So why do you think I have put these things together? Somebody had asked this question. I think Dehini had asked this question. क्यों Indian वहाँ पे क्यों डाला है? So this essay is an explanation for that. You have read all the three, all of you? Or how many of you have read one at least? Recommended reading में से? Etao, Dehini. You have read one or two, right? How many?
I have seen Heather and I have read Toba Tek-Singh, but ward number 6.
Yeah. So read ward number 6 as well. All of you. All of you are supposed to read it and bring it into your answers when you write essay type questions in exams, if we have offline exams at all. Okay, good. So what are the questions, queries, observations about this?
Sir, I have a question. I may look at this question in a wrong way, but I need to ask like, so if when comparing themes and images, we extract, I mean, the writers extract some images or themes from one culture and they put it in another culture. So is there a possibility that while extracting and inputting these images or themes, they devalue or demean the culture? Is there a possibility? Like, for example, when so when like in this essay there is an example of like when we are looking at the example of Heather and Hamlet, so Heather is inspired by the play Hamlet. So when Vishal Bharadwaj taken the context of Kashmir and he compares all the themes of Hamlet and put it into context of Kashmir, and he carves out a character of Heather. So doesn't it devalues Kashmir as well as something like what was initially shown in the play Hamlet, and it is not at all shown in the this Heather? So does it somehow devalues the culture from which it was extracted?
No. So how do you, on basis of what do you say that there is devaluation happening? What do you mean by devaluation? Can you be more? Can you elaborate upon that?
So what I meant to say is that like those are different cultures, right? I mean, Heather is a different is in a different culture. Hamlet was in different culture. So Shakespeare would have written in with context of one point of view, and Vishal Bharadwaj gives another point of view. So does it mean that Vishal Bharadwaj devalues the context which was initially presented by Shakespeare? Is there a possibility? Or even in any other case, like whenever a writer extracts anything from a culture which has been provided earlier.
Let's reverse this. Let's turn it on its head, right? Shakespeare has not taken this play. He has not invented the story of this play, right? Yes or no? Hamlet. He has taken it from somewhere. Yes, no?
Yes.
Yes, no. So do you think he has devalued that source from where he has taken his play? Do you think so?
I'm not sure actually. That's why I'm asking.
So I am asking you, what do you exactly mean by devaluation?
So I mean to say that there are similar themes, but when there are
Question is
similar
very
themes,
interesting. Well, your question is very interesting, but I am asking you about devaluation thing, right? Uh, and Wikipedia tells me that it is story that is taken from Scandinavian version of the story, uh, in which word somewhere. I will just show you. Share the screen with you so that you can look at what we are talking about. Yeah, the source of, right. So it has taken from Saxo Grammaticus, who is a Danish historian, right? And similar accounts are found in Saga of Hrolfr and the Roman legend of Junius Brutus. A reasonably accurate version of Saxo's story was translated into French by Francois de Belleforest in Historicis Tragicis, a French version, right? Uh, and there would be something like Poor Hamlet, possibly written by Thomas Kyd, his contemporary. So do you think that Shakespeare is devaluing, demeaning the source text by transforming it into his own play, taking that material and transforming it? Do you think so? What do you think? What is your opinion? When Kalidas takes the story of Shakuntala from Mahabharata and rewrites it, do you think he's demeaning, devaluing Mahabharata? Your question is very interesting. That's why I'm asking you.
so I'm not sure, but if the context which is referred in the data work is very authentic, then it may not devalue. But I was just confused. Like, is there a possibility? I'm not giving a guarantee that they essentially devalue, but is there a possibility? That is my question.
Now, the question of value judgments, right, is a tricky business. Would you agree with me?
Yes,
Value,
sir.
right? And we tend to consider the source as elevated and original and superior to the reworked version of it, right? That is what we tend to think. Now, is that very accurate? Value judgment demean हो सकता है कि नहीं, depends on what values do you adhere to that. What value system are you looking at something for? Right. For example, test question that was discussed is very important here. Tess is shown as a victim, a tragic victim of patriarchy and circumstances and all that, right? Social system. And she has to suffer, and she is compelled to kill somebody who seduced her. And that is the tragic story of Tess. But for Chinese people, that is not tragic story. For Chinese people, Chinese readers, it was something that she got what she deserved for disobeying her parents, for committing adultery. So she deserved to die for committing murder. So she is not a tragic victim. Now, which interpretation is correct and why? We are discussing value systems, and that is a tricky issue. That's what I'm telling you. Are Chinese wrong, as somebody would point out? What do others have to say? Are they asleep, or they have left, or they are busy chatting, or scrolling their feed, timeline, eating, or in the washroom? Huh? How many of you agree with Hetau's observation, a question that he has asked about the rewritten text which transfers this theme, possibility of demeaning, devaluing the original? That's the question he has asked. So what is your take, all of you, those who are awake and participating? Yeah, Dehini.
So I don't agree to what he said, because then it's like you're saying that this perception is wrong, this perception is correct. And in reality, there's no such thing as correct perception or wrong perception. So it's like when we say that Chinese people looked at something which is and here in the essay as well, it is explicitly said that the person who writes, who is the author, becomes the normal. He never said that the person who is the author and whatever that he's portraying is incorrect. So that becomes, yes, normal, and that might seem different, but no, since there is nothing right or nothing wrong, the problem of devaluation will also not come in this case.
Okay, Dehini, now you have taken a position that is often called cultural relativism, right? That means both the perceptions are correct according to their own value systems. So according to the Western value system, Tess is a tragic heroine. And according to Chinese value system, she is a bad woman and she deserves to be punished. Now, when you say that both these perceptions are equally valid or invalid, the problem is then what will you do if you say that what will your position be when somebody says that sati, committing sati or taking dowry is Indian culture, and so it is correct, it's our values, or caste oppression is our value, so it is valid? What will you say to that, Dehini?
The thing is, it's not logical. Sati is not logical, because I mean, from my perspective, but again, it's a change of perspective. Now what I think about something, whether this is right or whether this is wrong, would be my perception. अरे नहीं सर, मतलब ये I don't know what to say about this.
Yes, Heta, what is your opinion?
So again, I actually got a sort of answer from this essay itself. You know, there is a statement given here that beyond the establishment of basic possibilities of translation, the reader should feel that the rewards are in discovering what is different in individuals. So, like, I just want to say that, so when we say that let's consider Heather in a different context, and let's consider Hamlet in different context. Okay, so we are just comparing themes and images. Okay, we are done with that. But then, if in the end we are on the rewards are only in discovering what is different and individual, then why are we comparing? What is the sake of comparison?
So
That
what
is my
is the
question.
ground of comparison then? That is important, no? So after we discussed methodological tools like ground of comparison, interliterariness, now we have come to the question of themes, right? And themes, what do we mean by themes? As they say that the themes are something that connect one text with another. For example, theme of love might connect 50% of all literature written in the world, right? Deals with the question of love. So a Chinese novel, a Japanese manga, and a Hindi film, and a Telugu film, and a Korean song, pop song, all these texts can be connected through something called theme. So theme provides intertextuality, is one of the definitions of theme that they are giving out to begin with. Now, what's the role of that in comparative analysis, right? And we have to keep in mind that while we look at themes, we have to be clear about the grounds of comparison. That why are you comparing Hamlet with Heather? You have to be clear about the rationale of it, right? And what you seem to be saying is that value judgment is the rationale. Now, that is a trickery. That is something that we are withholding, Heather, right from the beginning. To say that one text is better than another is not the reason why we should be comparing. That's not a very useful or very academic perspective. To say that Vishal Bharadwaj is better than Shakespeare or Shakespeare is better than Vishal Bharadwaj. So that is that value judgment. So when you say something devalues, then we are withholding that value judgments because that cannot be very productive. We want, we are interested because how does Vishal Bharadwaj use this Hamlet to make his point, for example. That can be a research question. That can be the ground for comparison. I hope you can get that. How does Vishal Bharadwaj use Shakespeare for his own purposes? And a very famous statement by Gulzar, who was one of the team members, said that Shakespeare ke kandho pe se goli chalana. Right? So they are doing that. They are using Shakespeare for their own agendas. And their agenda is to talk about what they think or see about Kashmir. And for that, they are using Shakespeare. Right? And how is Shakespeare used would be a more interesting research question than whether asking whether Haider is devaluing Hamlet. Because value judgments don't take you anywhere. Right? In terms of inquiry. For example, Dehin said that Sati is wrong logically, but then what Tess as tragic heroine, right? He may be right according to the Western logic, but not according to the Chinese logic. So logic also has a cultural foundations. You cannot think of logic as being transcendental, universal logic. Koi hai nahi. Because for the people who worship Padmavati as a Sati, or there are many temples of Sati in India, right? For them, she is a goddess. And if you go and tell them this is illogical, irrational, then they may not accept your point. Right? So your values based on rationality and humanism may not be accepted by other cultures. What do you think about that? You think that rationality and humanism are universal values, right? But then somebody may point out that not only are those ideas from the West, but the West itself does not follow that idea. So it talks about it a lot. Right? These are the very people who talk about humanism and logic and rationality are the people who committed Holocaust and Hiroshima and Nagasaki and slavery and colonialism. So do they have any moral right to talk about morality? Can be another question. Right. So we are not in business of evaluating or judging one text as better than another in comparative studies. That's not very useful. Because I don't know where it will take us. Because किसी को लगेगा this is Shakespeare is demeaning those texts. But we are interested in why is Shakespeare using that Danish material, right? By Saxo in his context. What is his own agenda in using this a Danish material. So when he talks about something being rotten in the state of Denmark, Shakespeare may be talking about contemporary England, right? Yes, no? Just like, so Shakespeare is doing what Vishal Bharadwaj is doing, taking material from other culture because you think that that is very useful way of doing something to fulfill your own ideological agendas, right? So Shakespeare is doing the same thing as Vishal Bharadwaj is doing. So our job is to look at what are the agendas which are implicit and what are the ways in which that material is used by these authors in this context. That becomes a more interesting research question. What do you think, Heta? What is your answer? शेक्सपियर ने कहीं से मटेरियल लिया तो आप ये नहीं पूछ रहे हो कि वो डीमीन कर रहा है कि नहीं, बट है विशाल भारद्वाज ने किया तो आप कहते हो अब डीमीन कर रहा है, डीवैल्यू कर रहा है. सो दैट इज अ डबल स्टैंडर्ड इन दिस क्वेश्चन इटसेल्फ. थॉमस हार्डी का जो इंटरप्रिटेशन है वो सुपीरियर है चाइनीज इंटरप्रिटेशन से, बिकॉज वेस्टर्न कल्चर इज सुपीरियर टू चाइनीज कल्चर. ऐसे कुछ अजम्पशंस लेके हम चलते हैं व्हेन वी टॉक ऑफ devaluation or demeaning something, right? And that's why it's a problem, our assumptions behind the questions. So your assumption behind the question about originality and superiority of the source itself is a problem. Am I making some point? Am I being clear, or there is something that you don't understand, any one of you in the conversation? If you want some clarification, we can. If you have not understood, please. Yes, Vibha.
Okay, so I understand what you're talking about, like culture relativism. Like, but how, like, Chinese people misunderstood this Thomas Hardy's novel, and they think.
Now the question is, was it misunderstanding?
Isn't it just way that like a?
Did they misunderstand or they understood in Chinese way? ऐसे मैं कह रहा हूँ, पूछ रहा हूँ. Misunderstanding है ये
Yes,
Chinese.
of course, they understood in their own context.
Right. So what is the
yeah,
question?
It's Chinese understanding, but isn't they justifying rape? Like, isn't they justifying rape?
Is it? It was not exactly rape, it was seduction. And if you look at it, it was not force करके उसे. It is something much more less violent than that. Rape is very Hindi movie version of test story. But are they justifying? No, they are not justifying rape. What they are saying is she did not obey her parents, right? And she did wrong things for which she has to pay. ऐसे उन्होंने मानते हैं. That is there, and that's why they clapped.
Yeah, but like, I did not think that she did something wrong, because okay, that's my perspective. Okay, which is so, cultural, my cultural.
This is what connects to Devi's.
But I'm saying.
So are certain values universal, or are these values culture specific? That is the question. So we are dealing with basically only one question. There are things which are specific to a culture, and there are things which are not specific to a culture. There is something that goes beyond that culture, right? And that is the fuzzy border between the two that remains a problem, one of very important problems in humanities. And I don't have a solution to that, but I'm just pointing out the nature of the problem itself. Right. So humanity brings to fore certain problems rather than just offering simple solutions to that. So before you condemn Chinese interpretation, you have to also understand their perspective, right? They are not justifying claims. कहाँ पे है देखो?
Yeah, like I understand their perspective.
Yeah,
And
they may say,
it's
why did
because
she
of that
become
culture.
mistress of another man who leaves her, right? And
Yeah, but like we're not giving,
why did
like
she
we're
not
not
tell her
solution.
husband? Why did she not tell her husband before marriage that she was pregnant? Why did she hide it from him? All those things. This basically it is a tricky thing. The point that authors here are trying to make is that it's not so simple, right? Basically, so what they are saying is that even if themes are something that cut across cultures, like the theme of love, we have to recognize their cultural specificity. So what love means in a Chinese context may not be exactly the same as what love would mean in Indian context or in Tamil context or in Bengali context or in American context, right? Because themes have a context. That's what they are saying, cultural context. Yeah, Heta, go ahead.
So I guess my final understanding would be like that this essay promotes a concept of just comparison for the sake of comparing themes and images. That's it. So that's the end. Is that the end of?
No. Look at the so what is the argument in the essay? Can anyone tell me? Good that you raised it. Look at the last paragraph. That is the summary of the whole thing. Thematization then is an operation on meanings dormant in language, in society, in culture, performed by authors, and also by readers. The alert reader detects patterns of association or exclusion that give themes of a work their active role in generating new meanings. Right? So thematization is not something which is secondary but primary. And what he's saying is not comparison for the sake of comparison. He's saying that if you are going to compare something thematically, and that is very often happening. For example, if you are looking at Bangla literature and Gujarati literature, and you are looking at the theme of, say, for example, how freedom struggle is depicted in the novels, then you have to first take into account you take into consideration the historical context of the theme as well. And the message would be, a broader message would be, you watch Western TV series, Eto? Do you watch Western TV series?
Yes, sir.
Right. And now when you watch them, there are many themes in that text, right? In your series. Right. And you may enjoy some and you may not enjoy some. You enjoy some TV series, but consider that you have not really understood the themes in their cultural context and the question of difference of where you are. Say, for example, theme of friendship and love, sexual love that you see in an American series, right? And the question of sexual love and friendship in Indian context. You may enjoy it, but you have to take into account that it is a cross-cultural, what should I say, reception of that text, where your location as somebody who is located in Indian society has a kind of different take or different interpretation of that text from the one that is found in the American culture. Say, for example, I hope I'm making myself clear. A particular series means something else for the Americans and would mean something else for you, solely because of the fact that you both, the text and the reader, come from a different, or the audience come from a different cultural context. And as students of literature, now when you read Pride and Prejudice, and I think Dehini brought it up, right? Very important. It deals with a question that may seem universal, the novel Pride and Prejudice, that how does an intelligent woman go about looking for a husband? Right? What is good husband material for an intelligent woman? Now that may echo with many of women across the world, right? But at the same time, you have to take into account the question that this question is formulated in the context of class politics. While in India, along with class, you have caste as one of the factors which undergird institution of marriage in India. Right? In India, marriage is one of the important mechanism to ensure caste purity. Right? It's not just about class mobility. So that's why when Elizabeth Bennet says that I'm not doing mercenary marriage, I don't know how many of you have read Pride and Prejudice. Mercenary marriage is marriage for sake of economic lottery, right? I'm not marrying for the sake of money. I'm going to marry because of intellectual companionship and affection. The word love does not come into it so much. So that when Indians enjoy it, they have to keep in mind the differences in historical reception as well, right? The historical context of production and historical context of reception are different, right? So thematic comparison has to take these things on board when you compare. ऐसे वो कह रहा है. There are two important points these authors are making. First, that themes, though they cut across cultures, they can mean something entirely different in various cultures, right? Death in one culture may mean something very different in another culture, right? Chinese idea of death will be different from Japanese idea of death, will be different from Hindu idea of death, and will be different from death in Israel. So even if there is a cultural something that goes beyond the culture, but we have to take those historical contexts of production and reception on board when we compare. So he's not saying we should compare for the sake of comparison. They are saying that if you compare, these are the things that you have to do. I hope you get what I'm saying. कंपेयर करो, कंपैरिजन के लिए ऐसे नहीं कह रहा है. वो कह रहा है कि कंपेयर अगर आप करते हो तो ये चीज आपको ध्यान में रखनी चाहिए. And as Indian students of English literature, we are already always in comparison. Yes, no, maybe. When you read Shakespeare, you are not reading Shakespeare as a British person. You are reading Shakespeare as an Indian person. Yes, no. Yeah, go ahead. Who had a question? Yeah.
Yes, sir. Pankaj is here.
Yeah.
Sir, I joined later, but I want to add one point relating to the literature of Manto, what he wrote. So, sir, I think Dehini has already discussed about the thematic concerns in his short stories. But the what I have seen, like if I talk about specifically about thematic concerns, the notion of death as well as the inner conflict which he was having during that time, and as well as the grief of partition. So these all concerns or these all aspects were portrayed in a significant manner in his all short stories. Okay, if you look at Kali Salwar, Boo, as well as Thanda Ghost, Kholdo. So somehow he was dying in his inner soul. So that is the thing how he portrayed his grief into his short stories, and as well as the relevance of Manto is still alive. I think when if you read any of his short stories, so he was always telling to his friends Nadeem and Kasmir कि मैंने तो अपने कब्र का पत्थर तैयार ही रखा है, तो मैं आज मरूं कल मरूं उसकी मुझे फिक्र नहीं है.
So, but what is your question? What is the point that you're trying to make?
The thing what I would like to add is that the death, the connection of death, and the issues he was having, and he portrayed it in his short stories.
Yeah, so that had the historical and cultural and individual personal context, right? So themes occur in a context for the author as well as the reader. And so comparison should take all these things into account while comparison. That is the one important argument that they are making. That while themes of madness are found in Heather as well as in Toba Tek Singh, there are great historical cultural differences. And I don't know who mentioned comparing both. Dehini?
Yes, sir.
There is a theme of madness in Hamlet. There is a theme of madness in Heather. And there is a theme of madness in Toba Tek Singh. Right? All these three texts deal with the theme of madness. This theme of madness or feigned madness or real madness, we don't know. Some people say Hamlet feigned madness, but some people say he was mad. So what is madness, right? So theme of madness becomes an important question in all these three texts, right? So on one hand, theme seems to connect text cross-culturally in an intertextual manner. But on the other hand, we also have to read these themes in their historical context and their literary context. So in Toba Tek Singh, theme of madness is a metaphor in some way for communal madness, right? As if Manto is saying असली पागल Toba Tek Singh नहीं है, असली पागल कौन है? जो पार्टीशन करते हैं, right? Indian government and Pakistani government are mad people. So who is really mad? Manto seems to be indicating that these people are mad, not Toba Tek Singh, not people in the madhouse, right? So that is a satire that Manto launches. While the theme of madness in Hamlet is a different kind of trope, right? Whose meaning is not completely clear even today. That why has Shakespeare used that? And there are various views about it. And those who are aware of it may talk about the Oedipus complex in Hamlet. But the theme of madness in Heather, right, becomes something else, right? It comes closer to probably Toba Tek Singh's madness. That what is madness here in Kashmiri context? Who is the person who is mad? Is he Heather or people around him? Right? So we have to situate that theme in that specific cultural historical context. So on one hand, theme connects by going beyond historical context. On the other hand, it also is situated in this, that is the paradoxical place of theme in literary studies. And it goes beyond the discipline of comparative literature, because all students of English literature in India are comparative literature students. Because when you read Shakespeare, you don't read Shakespeare as a British person, you read as an Indian person, right? And then your perception is shaped by that. है? So when you watch a TV series like Game of Thrones or Friends or whatever, uh, uh, then your understanding of those texts, in spite of you understanding and enjoying the theme, is limited by these differences in your location as an audience and the culture from which that text emerges, right? So next time when you watch a Western film, then you have to be aware of these differences in historical context, right? So that is one message that is the summary of the essay. But there is another very important argument that there are two arguments he has developed. Second is that thematization was seen as secondary in literary studies, right? Technique, style, and craft was seen as primary, especially in the formalistic study of literature. Theme was seen as secondary. They are arguing that theme is not secondary. Author has consciously selected a theme and left other themes out, right? So there is a choice involved in the theme. Secondly, this theme also structures the metaphors and imageries that you use in your poem or work. And the example of that is found in John Donne's example given here. So John Donne, while he selects this theme of love as war and war as love, it is a very old theme, but that theme dictates the kind of metaphors he uses. So theme has an active role in particular literary text. It's not secondary as formalists would argue, right? So that is another very important argument. And they also talk about athematization, that is when a particular theme is not given prominence. So theme of marriage becomes so overriding in Jane Austen that theme of colonialism is in background. And Edward Said says that that Mansfield Park, though it is very distant from colonial politics, it is still there in the background. So when Jane Austen says, no, I'm not going to look at that and I'm going to look at only theme of marriage, she is exercising her agency to thematize. And when you thematize something, you athematize something else, right? And that is what we have to keep in mind when we study cross-comparative analysis of themes in literature, right? So he is not saying compare karne ke liye compare karo. I hope you get the difference. Comparison for the sake of comparison nahi keh raha hai. Hetav thinks that evaluation is the ground of literature, but Hetav evaluation cannot be very useful ground of literature. That's what I'm saying. And this essay does not talk about that. Evaluation is all extremely vexed phenomena, right? Maybe sati and rape may be extreme examples, but examples which are less extreme, like wearing burqa or parda. Some women may say that this is our agency, we are choosing to do that. Someone may say this is a sign of oppression, right? So where does patriarchal oppression, so where does these two things stop? You are left with two dichotomous interpretations which seem to two stands which are incompatible. One sees parda or burqa as assertion of female agency. The other says no, this is a sign of oppression. So आप कौन सा stand लोगे? And it becomes tricky, right? So evaluation is not, we are thinking of methodological questions here. And the traditional term for thematology or thematological analysis was called Stoff-Guess. I don't know how to pronounce it. Those who know German can pronounce it. And that was a German term for comparative themes, comparative analysis of themes. Right? So he says that this positivist attitude of or methodology cannot be used. We have to use different methodologies while comparing themes. And we have to bear a couple of things in mind which they point out. So that is what the essay is about. Any other question, doubts? Yeah.
Sir, can you repeat the meaning of stuff?
Yeah, stuff. Yes, it's a German term for thematic comparison. And it was positivist, means इसमें भी theme of love है और उसमें भी theme of love है, right? So that is similarity. That was what Germans did earlier, right? To which these authors say that that is not sufficient. We have to take into account the historical, cultural, and as Pankaj was pointing out, even personal contexts in thematization by the authors as well as by the readers, the audience. That is very important. Yeah, Rushi.
Sir, can you repeat the second argument the author makes? The first argument I understood that it is while we compare, we must remember that we must keep in mind the thematic concern first.
No, we have to keep in mind contextual aspect of the themes.
Right.
Context of the audience as well as context of the author. Right.
And what was the second argument?
Second is that theme is they are arguing against formalist insistence on form and style and techniques as against theme. Formalist, if you remember last year, they talk about how defamiliarization is primary, right? The focus of literature should be literariness, not the theme. ऐसा कुछ याद आ रहा है आपको Russian formalism में?
Yes, sir.
Even so these people are arguing against that. Yes, they are saying that when a person chooses to write about love, it's an active choice which structures the text. For example, John Donne has selected the theme of love as war metaphor. Now, all the metaphors and similes that you find then are shaped by this choice of themes, right? So it is choice of themes is very important in structuring of the text. That is, it is called thematization. And secondly, it also excludes the other theme, right? Because it is a choice. So when you say I choose coffee, you are excluding tea, right? So all choices have this other side of exclusion. And so we should be alert to these choices and exclusions that author has made when they thematize a particular theme. So why does racism figure prominently in the theme of growing up that you find in the novel called To Kill a Mockingbird? I don't know how many of you studied that. Did anyone have To Kill a Mockingbird in first year of BA? How many of you studied To Kill the Mockingbird? By Harper Lee.
Sir, not To Kill a Mockingbird, but we did have Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Okay. So that also deals with the question of slavery, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, sir.
I have not read it, but then when you say somebody chooses a particular theme, you also exclude many other themes, right? So theme is active choice made by the author and it structures the text. So thematization is not secondary like formalists are arguing, right? But it's also very important. So that is another argument that they are making. That thematization is active and important to understanding of the text. Right? So these are the two arguments. And that is also connected to imageology, which was another method. So when and many of comparative research scholars used to focus on image of a particular culture in another culture. Just say image of French culture in English culture. How are French people depicted? How is Paris depicted by Charles Dickens, for example, in Tale of Two Cities? Right? So how does one culture represent another culture? And as I think Dehini or Khadija was talking about, that it can be about stereotypes as well. How is Pakistani culture represented in Indian, or how is Afghan culture represented in media? That is also something interesting, right? It tends to be stereotypical. So images of, say, for example, Afghan literature in Marathi literature, right? If that is my research project, then I have to take into account that these images do not actually represent Afghan culture, but they offer an interpretation of Afghan culture in Marathi. I hope you get that. I'm looking at a couple of travelogues written on Afghanistan by Marathi travel writers. And that is what interested me, that how are Afghans represented in Marathi. Yeah, Pankaj, go ahead.
Sir, can you repeat your topic? I didn't get it.
How is Afghan culture represented in Marathi literature? So I'm looking at the travel writings of a Marathi author about Afghanistan. So these people talk about that in the top point, imageology, national images, page 70. So we have to keep in mind the differences, that the Marathi impression of Afghanistan is not the same as Afghanistan, right? Or what CNN shows you about Afghanistan is not Afghanistan, but American representation of Afghanistan. Because that was one of the important questions in comparative literature. Imageology. So imageology and thematology, ये दो important methodological questions हैं. So how do you deal with that? That is what the essay talks about. I think we have overstepped the time. Tomorrow we'll discuss if there are more questions on this. And if not, then we will go over to the next presentation on world literature and comparative literature. And who is going to be making it? Another short essay. Who is going to make presentation on Sandra Berman, world literature? Who is going to make presentation tomorrow? क्या हुआ? Who is going to make the presentation? क्या हुआ क्या? What happened? सन्नाटा क्यों आ गया इतना?
So we are not sure if anyone has selected that topic.
अच्छा, let me see in the group. Anyway, we'll find out and I'll put it in the group question. And if there are none, then you can tell me who is going to do that. And if no one is going to make a presentation, we'll skip that, but we'll include that for the exams. Unit 2, Essay 3, Madhumita, Aditi and Bhimika. That's what my chart says. So please inform them that they have a presentation tomorrow. Okay, so we stop for now and we'll meet tomorrow. Till then, take care and have a good day.